everybody, good morning. It is Sunday and we are going to do some yin stretchy yoga. If you're just getting set up, make sure that you have some pillows or blankets or anything you can use as a soft support for your body for some of the different poses we'll be doing. If you have yoga props, if you have bolsters or blocks or any of that kind of stuff, the essential point of yin is that we're going to be going into deep passive stretches. So whenever gravity's pulling on your body too much, you're going to want to have some support just to sort of give your body something to sink into so that you can really let go in all of the shapes. So it doesn't matter what you use as long as it's sort of supportive and not too hard. I find that hard support sometimes dig in and can cut off some circulation when you're in a pose for a long time. So grab a couple things if you haven't already. We'll get started in just a second. And if you haven't yet, please drop any requests below. It is never difficult for me to include extra poses so that you get what you need out of the practice. So if there's part of the body, maybe it's the front of your hips or your shoulders or chest or some part of your body you really want to get into today, just leave a comment below and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. I have a coffee. Yin is great for having, you'll notice all my cups are spill proof, but if you're practicing something a little bit low to the ground and you're not awake yet, I totally have coffee when I practice yin. Not so much restorative, but definitely when I'm practicing yin, but I have water too. But yeah, take your time to get yourself set up. We have another, I think, minute or two. Let's see how we're doing for time. You've got about 2 minutes, so you have some time to get set up. My coffee is hot. I see that some of you are here. The other nice thing about yin is you can set up your space to be a little bit cozier, cuddlier. We don't want to get so comfy that we're like doing restorative type stuff. Oh, good morning, Deborah. Yeah, hip flexors for sure, not a problem. Nice. The only other thing I could think of you might want for this morning's practice would be something block-like that you might want to be able to use to bring the floor closer to you for some of the poses that we might be getting into. I like yoga blocks. They tend to be pretty inexpensive, so if you're going to continue an ongoing practice, they're a good investment, I think. You can get different sizes. They're usually this like foam stuff. Watch me be super non-graceful on camera, but yeah, they're like this kind of thing. If you don't have these though, but if you have a couple of hardback books that are about this size, you can still use it as a flat surface. I'm showing you off camera. You can still use it as a flat surface on the floor, right, to put your hands on. It doesn't have to be able to go all these different heights. It's just super convenient. So if you don't have this, books work great. Extra, even extra, like, what am I thinking of? Oh my gosh, the future has taken over. Yellow Pages. What are those? Phone books. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot what that was called. Phone books might be good too if you have any of those kicking around, if they've still been delivering them in your area. I'm trying to think if there's anything else like this. Yeah, just scavenger house, but a couple things like this might be nice in the practice at some point. Alrighty, then a time check. Okay. Okay. Sorry, YouTube was telling me that I wasn't streaming for a second, and I'm like, what's going on? I think we're good. I think we're good. All right. All right, let's get started. So as usual, my favorite place to start a practice is in a little shavasana, just so that we have a chance to really arrive in the space. So take some time, grab some of your extra soft props, whatever you want to get yourself really comfortable, preferably lying down, but remember that if lying down is not your most comfortable place to be right now, then it doesn't have to be lying down. You could, maybe laying on the back is uncomfortable and you want to lie on your side. One of my favorites actually is to lie on my side, preferably with a couple props. Let me grab one of these guys. This is actually a restorative yoga pose called side lying shavasana. You get something sort of under your head, and then a bolster in front. I may or may not sleep in bed pretty much like this. And just get yourself set up so that you feel supported and your top leg is supported. This can be a really nice option for starting or ending shavasana. But find a pose that you think will work really, really nicely for you, and let's just get started. One more prop. So let's just begin by settling our bodies into our shapes. And so this process is sort of a little bit fidgety and a little bit adjusting as we sort of tweak all the little things needed so that we can really sink in and arrive. Couple deep breaths, maybe particularly focusing on sighing out your exhale. And let's just begin to let go of any held tension in the body. And I would say that this process of letting go of tension is probably the most active part of a yin practice. We use our minds in an active way just to scan the body throughout the entire practice and look for places that we might be gripping or holding tension in the body. And you'll find that you have some places where you're pretty much consistently all the time gripping and holding tension. And so common places for that might be in your jaw, maybe in your neck or your shoulders. I tend to grip and hold in my hips and my glutes. Notice the places where you do this and just consciously let go in those places. And then scan through the rest of your body. Look for any other places and do the same thing. Begin to feel the weight of gravity tugging your body into the earth. A sensation almost of sinking in or being pulled down. And this sensation helps us to even more deeply relax tension in the body. And as you sink in and allow the body to soften, bring your attention to your breath. And let's just begin to cultivate a comfortable but deep and nourishing breath. So in some practices that will be inhaling through the nose and out through the mouth. In some it'll be inhaling and exhaling in and out the nose. But if in your body it's most comfortable just to breathe in and out the mouth, then that's what you do, because we just want the deep, comfortable, nourishing breath. And just like with the body, when we first bring our attention to breath, it's a little uneven, it's a little, I guess, fidgety as we sort of settle the breath. So don't rush it or force it, just allow the breath to be a little bit uneven in the beginning. Maybe allow a yawn if it bubbles up. But just allow the breath to smooth and even out. And slowly bring your attention back to that place or places in the body where you found yourself gripping or holding. And notice if, as your attention shifted away, those places re-tensed. That's super normal and very, very common. Maybe they stayed relaxed, but either way, check in with them again. And maybe let them go again if needed. So while yin is a passive practice, it's also an active practice of consistently paying attention to the self, to the body, the breath, to the state of mind, and choosing to stay in an experience and to let go of tension throughout that experience. Easier said than done some days. Let's take 3 more deep breaths in Shavasana. And then as you're ready to start to come out, take your time and bring a little movement into any parts of the body that might feel a little stiff first. I like to start at the ends, maybe hands and wrists, feet, ankles. And then I move into shoulders, maybe some arms. So any kind of movement or stretching that feels good. We're going to be moving to our backs next. So any kind of stretching or movement that lets you just sort of unwind any tension or stiffness from that Shavasana. And then when you're ready, let's find our way into lying on the back for our first poses. Oh, we don't want to do it for that long. So come all the way to lying on your back. You want to move, ideally, any props out from under your head in the beginning here. We're going to just get into the sides of the hips a bit. Move some of these props off camera. Have a couple of folded blankets or a pillow reachable in your space for this first pose. And then we'll move into our shape. So I'm going to move my soft pillow away. Perfect. Maybe a little further away. Awesome. So our first shape, let me just make sure we're going to hear our dinger here. I'll bring my little timer with me. Our first shape is called swan pose, but we're going to do swan pose on our backs just to gently open up the outer hips. So we're going to start with the left ankle over the right knee. And so the first step is just to see what your body thinks of this shape as it is. Some of our bodies, this is going to be quite a stretch because we're going to have a sensation, maybe because of thighs pressing together, that our top foot's going to fall off. So if you're in that position, you've got a couple options. One option, you could do this pose with the bottom foot further down, which will create more space in the thighs. You could even do this pose with the bottom leg completely straight. Just try to not rest your foot on your knee, so you might have to take it a little lower. The other option to keep that foot feeling like it's going to fall off is to just take the ankle over the knee, take one of your folded blankets or pillows, roll a little bit to the right, and just tuck that blanket underneath the outer left hip, and you'll find that it lifts it up a little, makes it less likely for this leg to feel like it's going to fall. So once you get the general shape, you want to check in with your knee, and if you're feeling any tugging or pulling, you want to gently flex the top foot. So that means you're pulling the toes towards your knee a little bit, maybe pressing the big toe down forward a little bit. But you want to keep this leg as passive as you can. And finally, if you're not feeling enough sensation, you can either bring this bottom foot in closer or use this bolster or a pillow or a couple of blankets underneath your right foot to elevate it all up, and it will make it deeper. If you have a wall in front of you, you could even pretend I have a wall there, brace your foot up against the wall like this. So think about that for one of your practices. So let's get started. Find and kind of figure out your shape. And then let's just begin the process of settling in. And again, just like in that opening Shavasana, settling in is about a little bit of wiggle and a little bit of fidget until you find the right spot. And then in Yin, we want to really commit to that shape at that point. We've figured out what works, and now we want to settle in and begin that process of watching what the body is experiencing. Again, bring your attention to that sensation of the pull of gravity. Feel the weight of your body sink into the floor. Notice what's happening in and around your left hip. Notice if you're gripping as you concentrate on this shape. You might find yourself unconsciously gripping in the thighs, the hips, the glutes, the belly. Try to consciously release all of that work and effort in the body. Notice if the upper body is taking up some of that intensity, gripping in the shoulders or the neck or the jaw. And once you've consciously softened all over, then really bring your attention back to what you're feeling in the shape and send some breath into that feeling. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but just hang with me. Imagine that in the place you feel the most sensation, your inhale expands that place. And your exhale softens it. And then just stay with that experience. When your mind starts to wander, just guide your attention back to the feeling in the body. Do you feel this in your hip? Even a subtle feeling. Do you feel it? Can you explore it? Can you keep your attention on it? Last moment here. Take a big breath in. Exhale it out. And then before you rush out of the pose, we're going to do this stage by stage because we're actually going to move into a second pose before we do the second side. So keep your left ankle on top of your right knee. If you've got something under your left hip, roll gently to the right and slide that away. If you've got something under your right foot, you're going to want to slide that away as well. And then what I'd like you to do is walk your bottom foot, your right foot, over to the left side of your mat, pretty far, as far as you can manage. And then we're going to lift the hips and scooch the hips pretty generously to the left side of the mat. Bring the foot over even a little more. If you had a blanket or a pillow under your left hip, or if you have one handy, bring it around to your right side. I may have to scooch a little more to make myself have enough room here. But what we're going to be doing is rolling both knees over to the right. So I'm rolling onto the outer edge of my right foot and bringing my legs over. And you're going to hit a point where like, ooh, that's a lot of sensation here. When you feel that, you're going to want to back up. And if you haven't yet touched your prop on the right side, add more prop. So I haven't touched yet. So I'm going to bring this pillow over here. It's quite soft, so it gives me some room to sink in. And I'm going to just take it. And if it's a little bit too high, I'm going to just move it away so that less of it is underneath my legs until I find. And then as you move your way over, you might even sort of lift your hips and roll even more onto your outer right foot. That might be all you need to do to get into the stretch. And then the last thing is just to make sure knee is still okay. And if it's not, you make some adjustments. You could even stack this knee right on top of the left, sort of like that. Okay, or you can stay in this shape. And then let your left shoulder relax back. And we're going to sink into this pose. This one probably feels quite a bit more intense than the last one. So you want to take a couple of moments here in the beginning to do the fidget settle that we've been doing. So take a moment to see, okay, is this sustainable for 3 minutes or is it a little too intense? And if it's too intense, just back out, bring a little bit more prop underneath you and settle back in. That's about my perfect spot. In yin, you really want to find your Goldilocks place, that place where it's just not too much intensity, but not too little. We want to feel sensation. And once you've figured it out, now your job is to let go of all tension. See if that changes your pose or if it means you need to add more support. Sometimes we find that we're using our muscles, and then when we really let go, something starts to fall out of place, and we need to add a little more support again. But once you've feel like you can really let go and nothing really changes as far as your body, you don't feel like you have to tense, then we commit to the shape. And when I say that, I want you to know that it's always okay to come out of the shape sooner than the bell or when I cue you. It's always okay. What I mean by commit is that we want to avoid fidgeting and adjusting and using the muscles to experience the pose. You want to pay attention for any sensation that's not okay, and that's going to be pain, which we'll identify as anything sharp or stabbing or burning or electrical. And you're also looking for any sensation that might mean that we're cutting off energy or blood flow in the body, so numbness and tingling. And as long as you're feeling none of those things, a pose can be pretty intense, and you can just hang with it if that feels okay to you today. What I like to do in my practice is, again, focus on the sensation that I'm feeling. And in this pose, it's my outer left hip. And as I bring my attention to it, I let myself be curious about it, almost like I was examining that sensation from all angles. And that gives my mind a way to stay present. And then I utilize the breath. My inhales, I imagine they're expanding or creating space in that sensation. And my exhales are softening and releasing tension in that area of the body. So to come out of this shape, we're going to be very methodical. So take a moment first, take a big breath in, sigh it out, engage your belly a little bit. And then if you want to use your hand or it's a comfortable reach, you can help this foot untangle a bit. And the first thing we want to do is just stack one leg on top of the other. And then use your belly, walk your feet in, and roll to your back. Oh, move any props out of the way. And then let's just rest or stretch. So I like to take some movement and then a little bit of stillness before I move to do the same stuff on the second side. So take some time to maybe rock the knees or stretch the legs and the arms up. And then realign yourself in your mat. So that last one was a twist, so we ended up being kind of crooked and far over to the left. So find your way back to the center of your mat. Nice. So your left side probably feels way different than your right side right now, so we're going to do the same stuff on the right side. Now, for a lot of people, right side is tighter. So what you want to avoid is trying to push really hard to get it the same as the left. There is some unevenness in our bodies. It's pretty normal. But you may find you need to prop it up a little more. So right ankle over left knee, or as we talked about before, you might have your leg a little wider. You might have a bolster or a block underneath your left foot. And you might feel like this foot's going to slip if you don't put something under that outer right hip. So I'm going to move my folded blanket over. Roll a little bit. Tuck that under my outer left hip so I don't feel like my leg's going to fall. Find your way into your version of this shape on this side. Again, this is supine swan pose. And I do this one pretty commonly in my yin practice because I find it's a really gentle starting hip opener for the body. Doesn't ask too much of us, so especially when we're still sort of getting into this looser practice. So I felt some slip and I felt myself tense up against it. So I'm going to roll and adjust this bottom prop. There we go. So it doesn't feel like I'm going to have that slip. Sometimes people will place a soft, small folded blanket between their top ankle and their bottom knee or bottom thigh, and that might be a better adjustment for you to settle in. Again, as we settle, let the first few moments be a little more fidgety. And then consciously let go of effort and of tension everywhere in the body. It'll creep up into unexpected places, maybe the shoulders, the neck or the jaw, definitely around the hips or the glutes or the belly. And let's come back to watching sensation where we feel it. I even find sometimes in this pose that I'm gripping in my calf on the top leg or my thigh of the bottom leg. So consciously let all your muscles get a little bit jello-y, a little bit softer. Try to notice when your mind is wandering. Try to keep yourself present by anchoring your attention right into the sensation you're feeling in your body. And if that is challenging or too challenging, then anchor your attention to what's happening with the breath. Notice when you're inhaling. Notice when you're exhaling. We have a tendency when things are too still or when we're uncomfortable to distract ourselves. Last big breath here. And remember, we're going to be moving into that twist before we come out of this shape. So first, rock a little bit to your left and move anything out from under the outer right hip. Bring that same prop or something else over to your left side. But before we roll the knees over, we want to take that step of walking the left foot over to the right, lifting the hips, bringing them generously. And for me, I have to be quite generous because what we're doing is actually creating space for the hips in the twist. So I have wide hips. I come generously over. If you've got smaller hips, you may not need to go as far over as I do, but I'm pretty generous. So I'm going to roll it over, grab my soft prop here, and bring it to this side so I have somewhere to twist into, and then start to roll. And if as I start to roll, I feel like I'm a little stuck, I might even pick it up and roll more onto my outer left hip. So I bring this under, start to come over. Oh, and you'll be like, oh, too soft, too deep, and you'll want to adjust. So sometimes you need a little bit extra. Blankets tend to be a little firmer and less give than pillows, so they sometimes help accommodate that way. So take your time in the beginning of the pose to fidget. Maybe I need a little more today. There we go. And then settle your upper body into what's going to work for you. We want to sink the right shoulder back, but your hand might rest on your belly. It might be up overhead. It might be down low. Settle in. And then start to, as you settle in, let go of held tension. I just found myself gripping the back of my right thigh of all places. And as soon as I let it go, I was like, oh, sensation in the outer right hip deepened. So what happens in our body, particularly when we're feeling passive stretch, is the muscles kind of grip and hold around the intensity that we're feeling to take the slack away from the more connective, tougher connective tissues in the body. So it's an instinct, right? We tend to grip and hold against that pull. But in yin, we want to actually target those tougher connective tissues. So we want the muscles to be as slack as possible so that the tension of the pose, the healthy stress, climbs into those, but moves into those tenser connective tissues and impacts those spots. So we have tissues that are like that, the fascia in the body. That's the same sort of stuff that makes up the ends, the connection points of muscle to bone. And when you apply healthy tension to those places, they actually strengthen. So they sort of sense that something's pulling on them, and they're like, oh, we need to get stronger. So this actually strengthens the connections of muscle to bone in the fascia. But the other thing that happens is that we apply this tension to the connective tissue that hugs and surrounds every muscle in the body. So every muscle fiber, and then every group of muscles, and then every large muscle that we think of from our anatomy classes, all of those are wrapped in this like thin bag of white, tough connective tissue. And what hanging out in this passive way does is it starts to allow those tissues to lengthen just a little bit. And so if you think about it, we're actually lengthening the container that holds the muscle, which obviously then gives the muscle more room to lengthen itself. Really therapeutic, this practice. Really transformative. Check in with what you're feeling in your body. Use the breath to expand and soften if that's helpful to you. Let go of held tension anywhere you find it. And remember to breathe deeply, comfortably. Nice. So remember, we're going to come out of this pose stage by stage. And if you're feeling this pose a lot, you're like, oh my gosh, get me out of this. But take your time. So I like to assist my leg a little bit, just have a hand or two available to sort of unhook the top leg and slide it down along the bottom leg until that foot sort of touches the floor. And then engage your belly. Walk your feet up. Roll or find your way back to your back. Oof. Don't be surprised if you feel a little cramp as you come out. You need to wiggle it, stretch it out. Find some movement. Excuse me. Nice big yellow. Stretch. Maybe you want to plant the feet. Move your props out of the way. And rock your knees side to side. Get that pillow out of the way. There we go. Perfect. So a little bit of movement just to unlock any of that held tension in the body. Anything that feels like, ugh. But you should actually experience quite a big change in how the hips are feeling. So let's move up to sitting. So any way you want to come up, try to be mindful about it. You don't want to move too fast in yin. We don't want to jar any of the muscles. We're relaxing. So find your way up. And we're probably going to want to elevate the hips on something. If you are quite open, a lot of people are very, very comfortable and open, just like, wide-legged poses, no problem. Feet together, knees out, no problem. If that's you, you can probably sit right on your mat. But for a lot of us, we've got tension, knees are really high, or we feel a lot of pull in the front of the body when we sit up. If that's you, grab a yoga bolster if you have it, a rolled up blanket, or a couple of stacked up firm blankets, and elevate your hips. So we're going to move into the yin version of bound angle pose, which is the feet together, knees apart. Now in Hatha yoga, we tend to bring the feet in a bit, sort of like this. Some of us will bring them closer, some a little further. But this is the general shape in yin. In Hatha. But in yin yoga, we actually want to wiggle the feet further forward. Make sure the ankles are comfortable. You might need a little something right here as support. So I'll show you how that might. And then you actually might need some support under each knee as well. So sometimes I'll take something, kind of folded blanket. Yeah, that's so nice. Just under the outer edges of the ankles, because I find that my ankles sometimes get a little bit unhappy in this more diamond-y shaped pose. So I've got some support right here, and I'll adjust it so that it feels like the right amount. Now my ankles don't feel like they're getting too much tension. I will actually keep some sensation on the ankles because I feel like my ankles tend to be a little bit tight, and that helps to open them up. But you choose your level of sensation, right? So the next thing you're going to want to do is really get your outer hip and your outer thigh sort of rolled out from underneath you. So I'll rock to one side, pull outer thigh or butt flesh out, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. And then I'll move my belly in between my thighs a little bit. So a little tug here. If you're not real round in the low belly, you might not need to do that step, but I find it really helps. And lastly, we're going to find our version of this shape. So my version is going to be pretty far forward typically, so I won't use a whole lot of props. But today maybe I'll feel it out and decide, okay, that's maybe a bit much. And then I'll grab something to put in front of me. So I'll use my soft pillow here, which I know means you can't see my legs anymore, but I think we have the idea for the pose. And so this gives me something soft to provide a little support. If you're tighter, you're going to want firmer support or many more soft things. So if you're using soft pillows, stack more of them up so that you can sink in, but only so much. If you're more open, then a single soft support sometimes is all you need. But we're going to be bringing the upper body forward. And remember, for some of us, forward is going to look like this, and just our head is forward because we're quite tight. For some of us, the whole upper body will move forward. What you want to avoid is rounding the low back to come forward, and you'll be able to tell you're doing that because you'll be all up in your shoulders and head and sort of straining. And if you're in that place, better to lengthen, bring your prop in closer, and just relax your head. So find your spot. If you want to let your head go but not too much, maybe it pulls too much on the neck, then just bend your elbows. You can rest your chin in your hands, or you can interlace fingers, rest your forehead. Find your version. And let's complete that sort of fidgety stage of the pose and settle into breath. So again, you're looking for any places in the body where you might be holding tension, where you might be resisting the sensation of letting go. It's okay if the pose is a little sloppy looking, because in yin, we all look a little different as we sink in and let go of the tension. And then as you really let go, begin to notice where you feel the most sensation. In my body in this shape, I tend to feel more on the right side of my body than on the left side. So I feel a little sensation in the outer right ankle. I feel a good amount of sensation in the outer thighs and outer hips of both legs, but more on my right. And as I sink in, I feel like, okay, my body's settled. I'm feeling this pose less. I think I want to go a little deeper. And so I'm going to edge my prop forward a little to allow myself to explore a slightly deeper shape. If you're using no props in front of you, if that feels safe in your body, then your body will naturally sink a little bit lower to the ground with every exhale, just minuscule amounts as your body opens and releases. But when you're using a prop, you need to be a little more mindful of where you're feeling the sensation and how much of it, and make those little adjustments yourself. It can be really lovely here to notice the breath in the back of your body. And when you're ready to come up, press your hands down into your support or into your legs. Slowly, leaving your head a little heavy. Work your way more upright. If you were already more upright, then you're going to work your way behind you a little bit, bringing one hand and then the other. And if you were forward, you can do that too, but just take your time. It can be a little bit of a head rush when you're coming up, so move slowly. Bring the hands. Now when you're ready to come all the way out, you want to slide one leg forward, and then the other. And if you feel really old, you just aged like 10 extra years, super normal. Roll that out, move any props out of the way. You want to keep them handy, of course. So our next shape is going to start out looking the same, and then we're going to change it up a little. I was wrong. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to bring both feet up in front, knees up rather, hands behind. So this next one's going to feel awkward in probably most of our bodies. I've got props to lean back on, which is awesome. It's going to feel a little bit awkward. So it's really important that you find what's going to work in your body, because we all have slightly different angles of our femur bone, our upper thigh bone, into our hip socket. That dramatically changes how this next pose feels. So I'm going to show you how I set it up, and then all the different ways you can sort of make it work for your body. So first things first, you're going to want to walk your feet over to the right, a little bit or a lot, and then you're going to drop both knees to the left, and then you're going to come up with that because it's going to pull you a little, or it's going to be pretty uncomfortable. As you come up, you want to sort of wiggle so that ideally, to start with, this foot on the left side touches the right leg or thigh. Now, if your thigh doesn't come all the way down, if you're like, oh man, then lean away from the pose a little bit and see if it will. And if it still doesn't, then you want to grab a prop and put it between your leg and the floor so that you have a little bit less depth in that spot. Because here, right in the deep part of the hip, is where you're going to feel the most sort of pressure. And that's not necessarily our main goal for the pose. So we want to move away from too much of that pressure. And you might also need to adjust the belly a little here. Now, from here, you might need to take your legs a little further apart. You might need to pull this prop even on top of your foot a little bit so that your legs are kind of almost stacked. And then the last thing is to decide where your upper body is going to go. And it's going to really dramatically change the way that this pose feels. So on my body, I tend to like to bring my upper body more forward, which creates quite a bit of pressure in the outer left hip, but a nice kind of pressure. For a lot of bodies, that's going to pinch in here too much. So you might be more diagonal. So you might be lifting the belly, folding over this left knee, and that might be your pose. For some people, even that's too intense in this hip, and you're going to go lift the belly, bring it over the left thigh, and move a little bit over to the left. And again, here's a spot where you're probably going to want to prop either over here to sink into, or here to sink into, or forward to sink into. So play with your shape. This one's called deer pose. And we're going to sink in and explore. Some sensation in this right hip is normal and okay. You just want to find that place where it feels safe and appropriate for your body. So remember, if like me, you're using a really soft, squishy prop like a pillow or a couple pillows, remember you might need to use more of them to get enough lift and support. I'm pretty low in most of my poses, so a single soft support works. This is actually quite soft. This is a feathery sort of couch pillow, but it's so versatile. I love it for this practice. And just a reminder too that we often think we need to have all these accoutrements, these props and accessories, but you can usually make do with stuff you find around your house. Really notice your breath. And really let the head go. And if that feels too funky, then rest your head in your hands. You can also just lift your head a little bit, but try to keep shoulders as relaxed as you can. And I've got my fingers loosely interlaced because that feels nice. But sometimes it's easier to relax if you just turn your hands palms up, or let them dangle loosely with fingertips dripping down towards the floor. Your elbows might be on the floor, and these might not be the same sort of issues for you. Let's stay with a deep breath. And let's stay with noticing sensation. We'll be here for about another minute. Notice where you're gripping and soften. Nice, take a last big breath here. And just like before when we did the laying on our back hip stretches, we're not immediately coming out of this shape. We're going to change it a little, play with that, and then we'll move to the other side. So press your way up a little bit. So this pose you could also actually call half swan pose. And swan pose is the yin version of what we know as pigeon in Hatha yoga. So what we're going to play with, just for a short hold, so not as long as we've been holding the other poses, we're going to play with taking our upper body over this front shin, more or less, or over this front knee, just similar angle to what you already had. But we're going to work this right leg behind us more straight. So what I'm going to do is slide this prop out from underneath that leg, and I'm going to start to wiggle it back. And I'm going to work with my body, not against it. So I'm going to wiggle it back, and I'm going to start to inch it a little bit more to my left. And as I do, I'm going to start to roll my weight more forward. So I'm bringing this front hip more towards the mat. And if you're like, holy cow, Lisa, that's so intense, it's fine. We can also bring this foot back a little, which will make the pose a little bit gentler as we start to roll. And as you roll, your left hip will probably lift away from the floor. And your back toes can be tucked or foot can be pointed. And don't worry, like I'm super diagonal on my mat right now, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We want to work with the body. And the last thing I like to do when I'm doing this pose in a yin way is put something under this back left hip that's now lifted up. So I'm going to take this squishy pink pillow and shove a little bit of it back underneath my left hip. And then maybe we're going to end up needing another prop, but we'll just see how it goes here. And then I'm going to probably just bring my elbows down in front. And if I'm like, oh, too much, then I'm going to grab another prop, maybe a couple folded blankets. In this case, I'm going to grab a bolster because I want to have a firm support. You might need a couple things underneath you. And some of us will just keep the hands braced. And now the goal is to let go of the front of the right hip, let go of the back of the left hip. Deep breaths. Just a short hold here. So let your head hang. Let your hands be soft. Let your shoulders be soft. Maybe melt your heart a little. Really notice your exhales. Those are the part of the breath tied to letting go. Nice short hold. So slowly find your way up. Press your hands into your prop or into the floor. And then I scooch that pillow out from underneath my back left hip. And I'm going to roll back over to my left hip. Wiggle this knee up. Yes. And you notice you start to acquire this like pile of stuff around you, hey? So bring that foot forward. Oh, bring the other foot forward. Oh, flop everything around. Maybe you just shake the knees up and down a little bit. Point and flex your feet or roll your ankles out. And then let's realign ourselves in the mat. We're going to do deer pose on the second side. And as you can imagine, we're going to be moving from deer pose and then back into that swan pose. So move step out of the side because we're going to be moving to our right next time. So lean back, feet up, and the knees are going to start to move over. I'm going to want to have all my goodies within reach on this side. So let me just create a little pile over here. My pink pillow. That should be good. All right. So for deer pose, same business as we did on the first side. We're going to roll both knees over. So, like so. And inching that foot towards that thigh. Moving your upper body away from it a bit. Nice. So pull the belly into center if you're going to be going more forward. Nice. Grab any props you're going to be using. We'll see how this shape is on this side for me. I think it's a little bit more over the knee on this left side. And let's just sink in. Deer pose, second side. Again, find your breath. And if you feel a lot of compression between belly and thigh on the right side, don't be afraid to sit up, lift, and slide it out of the way. You might notice if you look at my poses that my right side leaning into the shape where we're focusing on sort of this left hip, my right side looks much different than my left. Much different. And yet, this right side is actually my tighter side. So one would think that I would feel this, I would be able to do the same. Again, notice breath. Shake or nod your head to release tension in your neck. And just let the pose happen, keeping your attention on what you're feeling. Keeping your attention on your breath. Notice when the mind wanders, and just lovingly bring the attention back to your body. Last couple of breaths here. And so remember, we're going to be changing this shape, not coming all the way out of it. So as you press your way up a little bit, you'll remember that where we're going to be headed is sort of more over this right knee as we begin to straighten the back leg. So make sure you've got all your props within reach and start to roll. I'm going to come out briefly just to grab my little device here, but you're going to want to start to roll more over this leg, and it's going to be a much shorter hold. So I'll set that up. And so I like to sort of wiggle, and I'm going to bring myself back a little bit because I'm starting to sort of roll off camera. But I like to sort of wiggle, and then as I wiggle, I start to move myself more over this right leg. And so as you see, I had to quite make a big adjustment as I rolled this left hip towards the ground. And then just as I did on the first side, I'm going to wiggle this pillow back and smoosh it under the back of my right hip, my right thigh, so that I have something to sink back into and it's a little less intense. And then I like to use firm support under my elbows. So firm support. So you might be more over your knee, or you might be more in to the side a little bit. It's totally fine to go where it feels right for you. Find your version of this shape and sink in. I really find that my challenge in these more intense feeling poses is that tension that creeps up into my glutes, my thighs, my hips. And again, remember, if during the wiggle process of finding yourself into this shape, you feel too much compression between belly and leg, don't be afraid to lift up. And I like to sometimes pull my belly a little to the left here, and that feels nice. Pretty intense, this shape on that outer right hip, especially if that's your tighter side. You're going to be like, whoa, whew. Make sure the knee feels completely fine, spacious, safe. And then when you're ready, just start to slowly, again, find your way up. And as I find my way up in this shape, I just roll away from that right hip long enough to pull that pillow away. And then I let myself roll over to the right hip, and I start to wiggle and jiggle this left leg up until I can find my way out of the shape. So nice and slow. I do a lot of inching of my feet around. Oh, and then take your legs wide maybe, or maybe lean back and rock your knees side to side. Everybody's got a different way to come out of these shapes. You want to find the way to come out that feels the nicest. So we've got one more set of sort of intense sensation poses to get into the front of the hips. So we've been really targeting all of the hips, but now we want to get into these hip flexors in the front. So really important, this is the part of the pose where you're going to, or part of the practice where you're going to want to have your blocks or something else firm. So make sure you have handy, and if you don't, it's fine. Make sure you have several folded blankets or towels or something that are a little firmer that you can use to support your upper body. So I'm going to show you where we're headed. So move this away. Some of my extra props are in the way now. So you're probably going to want something soft to put underneath each knee because we're going to be doing a low lunge type shape. So think about that. If you are on carpet and have a nice squishy mat like I do, it might not be as important. These poses we're going to be doing next are called dragons. They're all variations on low lunges. We're going to do probably 2 of each on each side. And the thing to think about is comfortable knees because that can be a real distraction. So I'm going to show you how I like to find my way into the shape using my blocks. And I'm going to have one under about where each hand is going to be. Now with books or something more floppy like a phone book, this is going to be a little more awkward. So you may need to just move the books aside until you're into the pose and then find your way back to having them under your hands. For me, I like to take the blocks and walk them over to the left. So actually, left, yes. I like to do my tighter side first so I sort of know where my threshold is. So I'm going to walk them over to the left, swing my right foot towards the front of the mat, and then bring them back in front again. And so you want your right toes to point right to the short edge of your mat, and you want your right knee to also be aligned with your second toe. And then we want to sink in. So what you don't want to do ideally is have your back hip right on top of your back knee. That just sends pressure down into your knee. So you want to wiggle your front foot forward until you can sink forward, and you're going to feel some stuff right here. So our first version of this dragon is just going to be a nice high dragon. So blocks under hands maybe. One block can be on the outside, one block on the inside, or both on the inside, but keep your knee pointed towards your second toe. And as much as possible in your body, try to let go, it's difficult, of the back hip. And let it hang. Imagine you were just creating a hammock. Let it hang towards the floor. Try not to press your hip towards the floor, but just let it hang and sag. And this one is really easy to grip and hold in the shoulders. Very short hold, so you can really let go with confidence. We've only got a couple more breaths. And then we're going to change it. Nice. Bring the right block inside the leg, or the right book, or the right hand. I'm going to bring the hands a little lower. And you're going to want to walk your right foot out to the right, pretty wide. Make sure your belly's in between. Walk it out to the right and then point it out at a 45-degree angle that way into the corner. And then maybe bring your hands a little bit lower. So maybe hands to the floor. Maybe some people will have something higher and bring elbows down. Some people's bodies will allow them to bring their elbows all the way down to the floor. Everybody's going to be in a different place. And if these poses make you want to just scream, that's really normal. It's actually really hard to soften the body because this is such an intense place to get into. The front of the hip just makes us cranky and tense. But see where you can soften and let it hang. And if you're too deep, notice that you're too deep. Come out of it a little bit. Try to let that hip hang like a hammock. We're not here for long. Last couple of breaths. Soften the elbows and shoulders. This is a really hard one to soften in, but you can do it. And when you're ready, Yes, bell rings. And start to press your way up very, very, very slowly. Straighten the front leg. And bring that back hip back, and you'll almost feel like it's like going back into place a little bit because it's been hanging and we haven't been using that muscle. So it feels a little odd coming out. Take your time. Find your way out of the shape. And what I love to do after that pose, is bring my big toes together, knees wide, squish up the front of the muscle we were just stretching, and just come forward for a breath or two. One more breath. Shake it out. And now we're going to do the same stuff on the second side, and I know you're so thrilled. But start to come up, shake it out a little bit, and we're going to do the second side. Same stuff. This time, what do we have up front first? Right leg was up front. So we want to walk the blocks over to the right, or walk your hands over to the right. Swing your left leg forward. Sometimes you have to lift the back leg and scooch it back. But again, you want to be able to let that leg be at an angle. You don't want to be right up and down. If you're a little tighter, then bring that front foot in a bit. Have a littler angle, but still an angle. Let's sink in. First dragon. High flying dragon. High flying dragon, we're often here. This is actually more of a low flying dragon. You could intensify the pose by climbing all the way up. Maybe taking the hands up. But I like to keep it a little bit lower. So it's just a variation, sort of a medium flying dragon. Remember as much as possible to let that back right hip, the front of the right hip, just hang. Easier said than done. We're more than halfway there already. If you're feeling too much squish, bring the hands in. Maybe even take them at an angle. Anything that just lets us let that right hip go. And if you're struggling, focus on your exhale. Nice. So bring the blocks of your hands a little lower. Walk that left foot out to the left. And I go quite generous. And then I turn the foot out at a 45-degree angle. Bring my blocks more into the center. Pull my belly in from my thigh and sink forward. Whew. Nice. This is a variation on winged dragon. Another variation has you actually taking that knee out to the left more, like winging it open. But we're just going to keep the foot flat for now. Again, let the right leg hang. It's okay if there's some tension in your body. It's totally fine. If it's too much, you always can come out of the pose sooner. If you're like, lady, this is killing me, find your way out. The important part is that you feel safe and that you make this your practice. If you're still in it, we're 3/4 of the way there with just time for a couple more breaths. Focus on that exhale. Nice. So again, you want to come up really slow. So I start to straighten my front leg because that helps to push my back hip back over my knee. And then you feel it sort of go back into its normal place. And then I just wiggle out of this any way I can. And I'm going to take that little child's pose because I think that feels lovely. You can do anything you want to unwind from that past shape. But I love to squish up the muscle that was just stretched. So when you're ready, come up to hands and knees. If you think it would be okay for your body, I'm going to finish my practice in a little baby crocodile pose, which is just the tiniest little back bend, but it's still pretty comfortable. You're welcome to just roll to your back instead. For your Shavasana, this is not quite a true Shavasana for me because I will be feeling some sensation, but I like to close my practice in that way when I haven't done a lot of back bends. So, for my body, I'm going to just lay down on my belly. Flatten out the front of each hip a little. Stack one hand on top of the other with wide elbows and just rest my forehead down. That's going to be my closing Shavasana. You do whatever version of Shavasana you would like, but settle into something that you think you can hang out in for a couple minutes, and we'll close out our practice with that. So when you're ready, just begin to invite a little bit of movement into your body. If you were in the back bend like I was for any reason, then just rock your hips a little side to side. Whatever pose you're in, mindfully find your way to a seat, taking your time. But if you were in this little baby back bend with me, then maybe just pause as you find your way up. Maybe transition to hands and knees, and then take that little baby child's pose. Knees wide, hips back, belly forward, just for a breath, maybe two. Just to lengthen the low back. And then when you're ready, find your way up to your seat. Any way you want to get there. Any comfortable seat works. Love it. So roll your shoulders up to your ears, back and down. Rest your hands anywhere in your lap you like for just a moment, and take a nice big inhale, lengthen your spine. As you exhale, bow your head forward, and then bring your hands palms together, light touch of your thumbs against your heart. Closing today's practice with deep gratitude for ourselves for making this time for self-care. Gratitude for this practice of yoga and for each other. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me for this practice this morning. This was really lovely to get into the hips like that. Thank you, Deborah, for the request for hip flexors. And just again, thank you all so much for sharing this experience with me. As a reminder, there will be no live class on Sunday this coming up weekend. So we'll have one on Tuesday, none on Sunday, and then it will resume again, I believe, the following Tuesday. But I'll have all those events up on my Facebook page and in my Google Calendar. September's a little up in the air, so I'll have that out soon. But Tuesday classes are probably a go through September. It might or might not be some skips on Sundays. We'll see how it goes. But stay tuned, and again, if you have any questions about any of the poses we did, if you want specific tips for how to do a particular pose in a way that works for your body, hit me up on Facebook or send me an email at lisa@fatyogini.com. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye!